Hi everyone, and welcome to week 10. Can you believe that this is our final and last week of class? Well, we still have a lot to talk about with talking about the changing American family this week. And so, as in previous weeks, there's a variety of slides. We also have a lot of data on the slides here. And I'd like you to know the general trends. Of course, because the final exam is open book, you will have access to go back and look at these things. But be familiar with the trends. Be familiar with what they mean. And I'll do voiceover PowerPoints on some of these, not all of them though, because I would like you to be able to download and be able to listen to these. All right, so let's jump on in. One of the things that we know about marriage laws in the United States is that they've changed a lot. One of the things that changed before many of us were born was the legalization of interracial marriage, which was legalized on a national basis in Loving versus Virginia in 1967. Loving versus Virginia was the case, and I believe it became a movie last year as well. However, before this, before the Supreme Court decision, interracial marriage was permitted in some states in different time periods. So you can see here where there were spaces and states where interracial marriage was banned, and then the dates or the time periods in which it was legalized. And for those that were completely in white, they didn't have any laws on the books that were forbidding interracial marriage. So as you can see, in 2010, 9.5% of all marriages were interracial, and that number has only increased since then by a slim margin. 92% of all interracial marriages involve a white person, and yet only 4% of whites are involved in the interracial marriage. So what is this saying? This is saying that there's a lot more white people than people of color within the United States for any particular racial group, if you're looking at each individual racial group. And so there's more of a propensity for interracial marriages to involve a white person. So now let's think about marriages that occurred in the year 2010, which is the last big census data gathering data point. About 15% of all 2010 marriages, that's not all marriages that were existing, but people who got married in 2010. And the number have increased for white individuals, African American and Latina and Latino, and Asian American. You can see that the highest number is amongst Asian Americans who are having interracial marriages, followed by Latina and Latinos. So it has increased since the 1990s, 1980s, 1970s, and it will probably continue to do so. So I think what we have between this slide and the previous slide is two interesting different data points. So the first is that there are more homosexual interracial couples or interethnic couples than there are heterosexual interracial or interethnic couples. So that in itself is interesting. The second thing is that depending upon where you live, there are going to be higher or lower rates of interracial couples. So for instance, on the West Coast, there's a much higher rate, and in New Mexico, Arizona, etc., a higher rate than, for instance, in areas like Michigan. Part of this is going to be just the ability, the proximity, and the number of people who are from interracial from different racial backgrounds. So if you can't meet people, it's going to be very difficult to marry them if you don't end up meeting someone who's of a different racial group. And it's more likely on the West Coast and in areas such as New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, to meet someone and to find them and then to marry interracially. Now, why do people get married? In 2017, our present time, there's a number of reasons why, and this includes three kind of large components. First is the personal commitment of marriage, that you and another person decide that you're ready and you're willing and you want to be together, that you want to put your lots together in life and to struggle and succeed and do all of the things that there is. That is the personal commitment of marriage. This can include a religious component. It can include your own personal morals and beliefs toward a person. The second aspect is the social status of marriage. And the social status of marriage includes how your marriage is recognized by others. That you might be seen as an adult in your family once you finally get married. That you might be treated differently. You might be taken more seriously. That you and your spouse as a marital unit may be seen and comprehended differently than if you were just dating or cohabiting. And the third is the governmental recognition of marriage. So this includes laws and benefits that you may receive. It includes taxation. It includes debits. There are a variety of things that we'll get into about responsibilities in a couple of slides that are related to the status of a couple as married rather than as single. In 1987, after interracial marriage was legalized, but before same-sex marriage was legalized, the Supreme Court went and said, what is it that makes marriage important? Why do people marry? And the marriage includes all of the aspects that are written below. That it's a public statement of commitment, that for people it can have important religious or spiritual dimensions. It can offer the prospect, though not the guarantee, of physical consummation. That it's a precondition for many benefits and responsibilities and protections. And that some people may desire to have children. Now, certainly not everyone desires to have children. If you marry when you're 75 years of age and your spouse-to-be is also 75 years of age, the chance that you're going to have children together is probably slim to none. But you still might want to marry. In 1996, which seems like a long time ago now, the Congress of the United States passed the Defense of Marriage Act, which indicated that no state had to recognize same-sex marriages that were performed in other states. So this is to say that if you were married in one state that permitted same-sex marriage or a civil union, that no other state had to respect that marriage as such. That if you were married in Texas, it might not be seen as a valid marriage in Arizona. Crossing state lines would nullify your marriage. This was one of the ways that Congress was attempting and trying to make it so that same-sex marriage would not be seen as permissible or as legal. So while the previous section was about the portability of marriage, this section on this slide talks about the federal level, that with all federal agencies, marriage would only be a union between one man and one woman. Now, of course, this has been nullified with the 2015 Supreme Court decision about same-sex marriage being permissible and legal within the United States. I think what's really interesting about this, and on the next slide as well, which I'd love for you to look at, is to see how those regulations, the Defense of Marriage Act, the Federal Marriage Amendment, which did not pass, how those legal ways of enforcing discrimination amongst people, how they changed very dramatically over time. So what we have in this slide is right before the 2015 Supreme Court ruling that recognized same-sex marriage as legal. You could see that many states had already said, well, it is allowed, right? And on the next slide, this is going to be a demonstration, it's very brief, about how the legality of same-sex marriage on a state-by-state basis changed over time. Similar to interracial marriage, changed on a state-by-state basis before it went through on a federal level basis. So what we can see here is that though we oftentimes think that people used to get married at very early ages and now they get married at later ages, it's much more common for people to be in the 1890s for people to getting married at older ages. So that it was at age 22 was the average or the median, 50% above and 50% below for women, and 26 years of age for men in 1890, over 130 years ago. And now, or about 130 years ago, and then it dipped and dipped, and after World War II, it really dipped to a low point. So it had gone to about 23, 22 and a half for men, and around 20 years of age for women. And then by the time you get to the 1990s and the 2010s, it has risen dramatically again. A lot of this is due to the economy. A lot of this is due, and the cost to set up your own household versus staying with your parents. A lot of this is going to be due to people's educational desires and the desire to complete their education before they marry. And a lot will also be due to changing views of the role of sexuality in individuals' lives and whether having sex before marriage is seen as culturally appropriate or culturally inappropriate. And as you can see here, there has been a dramatic decline in marriage amongst different generational cohorts. So for the silent generation and baby boomers, they were much more likely to be married, 65% and 48% by age 18 to 32. For Generation X, this is much lower at 36%, so just over a third. And for millennials, it's just slightly over a quarter. As you can see here, the average age of first birth for a woman is getting older over time. So in 1970, the average age was about 21 and a half, 22. By the time you get to 2014, it's 26.3 years of age. Why is this occurring? Well, it's getting more expensive to have children. It's getting more expensive to maintain a household. It's getting more expensive to attend college. So if you can control your expenses by delaying childbirth and delaying parenting, children are very expensive, then you are more able to get further in life. And it's more culturally acceptable to become an older parent now than it used to be a generation ago. So let's see how this occurs by mother's age on the next slide. All right, so on this we have the thousands of babies, so add some zeros to the end. They're born per year based upon the mother's age. What do we see? So we see that for instance, if you look at the purple rate, the teenagers who are between ages 15 and 19, and it was about 50,000 to 60,000 per year up until the early 1990s, and then it's dropped dramatically. This is due to increased sex education at schools, increased ability to access contraception, and delays in age of first intercourse. If you get to the women who are in their early 20s, the birth rates are going down. If you get to women ages 25 to 29, the birth rates have also gone down just a smidge. So they've gone down dramatically for teenagers, dramatically for women in their early 20s. They're going down by a smidge for women in the 25 to 29 rate. For women 30 to 34, it's going up. For women 35 to 39, you also see a dramatic increase. And even women ages 40 to 44 have a dramatic increase. There's a much lower increase. It's pretty flatlined for women ages 45 to 49. So even though you hear media stories about these older mothers, they're much more rare. But we do see those increases amongst older mothers and decreases amongst younger mothers. Again, demonstrating that women are delaying, on average, having children. This is true also for women of different racial and ethnic groups. So as you look at all of these different groups that are listed here, women are waiting longer to have children. So it's going up on average of 1.4 years to 26.3, but it's varying between 23.1 for American Indians and Alaskan Natives to a high of Asian Pacific Islander women of 29.5 years of age. And you see in the parentheses how much longer it is, right? When that's in year 2000 versus in 2014. So there's probably a couple of things going on in this chart. The first thing that you could look at is between 1940 and about 1960, when women didn't have access to good, routine, dependable birth control, and thus women who were ages 40 to 44 who were premenopausal were likely to be having children because of a lack of ability to stop. Then you get to 1960 to about 1990, where you've got the dropping birth rate and then birth rate staying low. And this is when women are having more access to birth control. So those women who are ages 40 to 44 are more able to control the number of children that they have and to stop having children as they get to a certain age. However, then you've got from 1990 to the present, where there's an increase in the number of births amongst women ages 40 to 44. And this is probably explained by IVF treatments, as well as by women who have been delaying childbirth for a number of years, but now are deciding when they're older to become parents. So whether it be through unassisted or assisted procreation, you have an increase of older mothers during this time period. So again, on the left-hand side, we probably have a lack of birth control, and these women probably also had children who were younger or when they were younger. And then in the middle section, we have the increase of birth control. And then on the right-hand section, we have an increase of women who have probably been delaying childbirth and now are engaging in becoming parents through IVF or through natural means. Now, I'm sure you answer all of these questions to yourself before you listen to the audio file here, but probably some of the things, the way that aging parents may change families in the United States is that you'll have different kinds of child rearing practices. Research has found that older parents oftentimes have more maturity, that they're more patient than younger parents, though younger parents oftentimes have more energy and vitality. Older parents typically are much more well-to-do financially, and on the other hand, they're less likely to have non-monetary resources such as grandparents who can actively babysit and be engaged in their children's lives. The second shift occurs when you have your first shift at your day job, at your work, or your night job if it's your night job. The second shift occurs when you go home and you have another job waiting for you there, taking care of the house or apartment, taking care of children, cleaning dishes, cleaning laundry, cooking food, going grocery shopping, coordinating activities, transporting children, transporting elders, performing elder care. All of that is your second shift.